Offense, defense, neutral, scramble. We've talked about what the phases are, so now it's time to see what they look like in action. I'll be using one of my favorite games, Guilty Gear, and a couple of its best players to highlight and show the way that players and characters alter the way you approach the phases. Coincidentally, these two players play like two sides of the same coin. One is a daring gambler, and the other is a cold strategist. My name is Krishna Kino, and this is Fighting Games in Phases.
Teresa, Wild Child.
When I call Jam a wild child, I mean it very sincerely. This is a character designed with laser focus to be standing directly in front of the opponent, picking them apart with basic yet menacing offense designed to elicit fear and clumsy mistakes. If Jam's throwing hands, she's going to keep throwing them until someone's on the floor, either the opponent or herself. This is why she's the perfect character for a guy like Teresa, who, in all honesty, is probably a wilder child than she is.
DPRC, into the corner, he's gonna get the kill off. Let's see if he tries a hard bait. Teresa, it looks like he's trying to bait him first. Yeah, he's going. Hotashi was ready, he's feeling it. Alright, it looks like Teresa's kind of having like...
Yep, dude just really loves the game. This section is as much about Teresa as it is about Jam herself. This dude is wild, like seriously. Despite making a name for himself in Guilty Gear in Japan, he's been on record to state that American tournament scene is much more exciting. Here in the States, the Westward Dragon can really just be himself. But what about Teresa's game? The best way to describe it is to call his playstyle a nail-biter generator. By design, Jam has never heard of the word neutral in her life. This character prefers to skip that phase as often as possible, getting down and dirty, up close and personal. But what happens when things don't really go according to plan? Well, ask Teresa. This guy's constantly digging himself into and out of corners due to risky decisions and daring maverick gambles. The double-edged sword of playing Jam is that every mistake you make is made up close and personal too. And then it's their turn to knock your teeth in. But, time and time again, Teresa clutches his way through some of the scariest setups in Guilty Gear history. Either through pure luck, skill, or, well, hype. Pure hype. This is how the wild child fights on his back foot.
If we had to put Jam's phase tendencies somewhere on a graph, they would look something like this. But as a player, Teresa's are naturally skewed like this due to his daredevil antics. But what exactly do I mean by this? Take a look at these clips right here. With his back pushed against the wall, Teresa's first instinct is not to play it safe and block, but rather to try something very risky. Jam's unique defensive mechanic, the Hochifu parry. Almost immediately, this proves ineffective, and then he has no choice but to spend his burst. But why would he burst so early in the match, with Daru so close to winning? We'll have to see how that pans out. At the start of the next round, Teresa is in a terrible position on paper, but regardless, he comes out swinging. A lot of people might call it bravery or stupidity, but what Teresa is actually doing is sacrificing rounds in order to gain information on the opponent. By the third round, Teresa's burst had recovered faster than Daru's. His decision to burst early was also an investment in the future of this game. Later, Teresa stakes it all and does a super with a long recovery on the off chance that Daru will press a button. The gamble paid off, but if he was wrong it would have costed him the game. He takes similar risks against other characters and other players. For example, deliberately using the instant block mechanic to extend his airtime against Hotashi, and drop on top of him with a counter hit. Or in the way he decides to jump in, backdash, and come out swinging against Takehara. High stakes, no breaks. This example is a beautiful illustration of Guilty Gear's scramble phase. The clip from earlier was actually Teresa's reaction to a burst bait from Hotashi. Since the burst is often the last line of defense against defeat, having someone trick you into using it is one of the biggest shames in Guilty Gear. They even call it getting your soul stolen within the community. As we mentioned with the scramble phrase, it often occurs when neither player has a set game plan or reaction to an unprecedented scenario. And as you might be able to tell, due to the way he plays, Teresa finds himself in a lot of scrambles. During this particular one, Teresa attempts to use the YRC mechanic to stop time and survey the field, giving himself more time to think. But instead, this gave Hotashi more time to enforce his offense and formulate a plan to bait his burst. Later, likely by complete accident, Teresa places Hotashi in a nearly identical situation. However, his burst bait was not on purpose. It just so happened that Jam's body was low enough to the ground that the burst animation couldn't knock him away. Either way, Teresa capitalized on this situation as if he meant to do it all along. This is Teresa's dose of karmic retribution. Above all else, Teresa is an entertainer. He likes to go big or go home. Coupled with a character who rewards his brash decision-making and risky life-or-death gambles, he and Jam make for a very dynamic duo. Because of the way he spends his 4 phases, Teresa is truly a wild child.
Summit, Crouching Tiger.
Chip Zanuff is a fast, tricky, and explosive character who is known best for his complicated setups and terrifying mix-up potential. For example, if Chip has you at the wall after a knockdown, you can get hit here, 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 or here. Yeah, it isn't pretty. He's often referred to as a blender character for these traits. If you get hit even once, you're already mincemeat. In the hands of a skilled player, Chip is just as, or maybe even more dangerous than Jam is. However, he isn't often played quite so recklessly. Almost as if to directly contrast Teresa's preferred playstyle, Summits can be described cleanly in just 3 words: sharp as ice. What I mean when I say that is that Summit does not make mistakes. Cold, slippery, and refined, he plays a very non-committal game until he sees it, an opportunity to strike. From there, it's over faster than you can blink. But what necessitates this iced-up playstyle? Well, let's just say they call him Chip for a reason.
Oh, and he went low. Oh, danger time. Danger
All right, this
time.
is scary.
Oh, this
Oh
is
my
dangerous
God.
time. Danger time.
Oh.
This is so. Oh my God.
That's it!
That was the
How
most.
fast was that?
He crumbles, like a chip. So, when formulating an offensive plan with a guy who's flimsier than rice paper, many players struggle to strike the balance between Chip's startlingly low health and volatile damage potential. His defense phase and offense phase both lie in very extreme extremes. Let's take a look at how Summit handles these weaknesses.
After failing a mix-up near the mid-screen, Summit is nearly hit by a nasty combo from Daemondo's Slayer. And we've already seen how poorly that can go.
Oh my God! That's it!
Instead of pressing his luck, Summit decides to back off. He uses Chip's unique wall cling and kunai projectile to bide his time outside of Daemondo's reach. Almost as if to say, if you want me to stop, come get me, he spams the little knives as long as the game will let him. This is stalling, a provocation. Notice how Daemondo takes the offensive as soon as Chip comes down. Simple tactics like this can work at all levels of play, even against the very best in the world. Like a wrestler using his opponent's weight against him, Summit has reversed the situation and left Daemondo in dire straits. This is how Summit shows us how to pump the brakes. This example shows us that Summit prefers to dance outside the opponent's effective range during the neutral phase. But it also shows us that phases don't necessarily end when the other player finds an opening or reverses the current phase. Instead, players can end them willingly too. After a nasty offensive sequence, Summit suddenly backs off and creates space between himself and Cha-Cha-Cha. This is because he's decided that he's exhausted all of his options and needs to back off to prevent himself from overextending. From this range, you can make use of Chip's killer offensive teleports and horizontal slashes for an alternative purpose: long-range whiff punishing. By using quick moves to reposition and pester from the outside, he baits his opponents into using something that will reach him in neutral. But moves that would reach Chip from this range are usually slow to come out or slow to finish, giving Summit ample time to attack his opponent's mistakes more often. Now you see me, now you don't. Teresa might be a beloved player for kicking and screaming his way out of tight spots, but Summit is renowned for his level head. He's rarely ever in these tight spots to begin with. Instead of exposing himself to unnecessary danger, Summit chooses to wait. By playing his neutral phase as cautiously as possible, Summit can mitigate the chances of initiating a scramble. And while they happen no matter how prepared you are, his tend to be fewer and far between. Summit is a player who will rarely make the first move in neutral, instead electing to let the other guy dig his own grave. Since Chip is a character who likes to pounce on small mistakes and throw people into difficult offensive situations, it's almost as if Summit himself is the yin to Chip's yang. This is what makes him the Crouching Tiger. Fighting games can be a difficult subject to watch and talk about, much less design. But when you separate the flow of the game into 4 distinguishable phases, it becomes easier to see how players interact with the systems of the game and why they choose to do so. It can be used as a framework to imagine how players will interact with their own competitive games mechanics as well. Teresa and Summit are both players of a highly technical, fast, and punishing fighting game, but their styles are different, and most importantly, unique. The beauty of a competitive game is that, no matter what the phases or the rules are, the way you choose to play is a style that belongs to you. Whether you choose to gamble like Teresa, or play it cool like Summit, the phases are here to describe you, not bind you. That's all. Thanks for watching.